am turning 45 years old this week. My birthday is this Friday, September 6th. And yes, I am a Virgo. And I couldn't tell you what I did last year for my birthday because I was in such a fog, slowly healing from my head trauma. So I am stepping into this new year with so much gratitude. I mean, it is oozing from me because I honestly didn't know what 44 years old had in store for me. To tell the truth, I spent most of my 44th year healing my body and healing my brain. And I'm stepping into 45 with a bit more healing to do. And that's okay because there are still days that I am struggling. I mean, I am in perimenopause. Some days are amazing days. And other days, like today, I am struggling with a debilitating migraine. That pretty much rocks my world. And despite the more challenging days, I am committed to optimizing my metabolic and brain health. And that's why I devoted today's episode to this topic. This is technically my birthday episode. And I thought this is the right conversation to have. A topic that I believe is near and dear to all of us because each of us knows not one, but many people who are struggling with metabolically driven conditions. I'm talking diabetes, I'm talking prediabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, fatty liver disease, heart disease, and cognitive decline. I currently have family members and friends that are so very close to me who are struggling with both. And I believe a big part of our midlife journey involves creating daily habits that support and optimize our cellular energy, whether that's our brain cells or heart cells or bone or gut or immune cells. If you are on a healing journey right now, I want you to know that I am standing right by your side. I get how hard some days are. There have been days that I would desperately cling to my old self, and other days when I would just surrender because honestly, there was no other way. I believe surrendering to healing is one of the best things that we can do, right? Soften into the experience because I have tried the latter. I've tried to effort my way through healing and it hasn't really worked out for me. Now, there's a prayer that I have said hundreds of times from a book called Outrageous Openness by Tosha Silver. And I want to share it with you very quickly because it has helped me tremendously to surrender on days where that's all I could really do. Here's the prayer. God, show me how to live this. I surrender and offer it up. Divine is my source for all. Now, it is a short prayer, but man, it packs a punch. And there are days where I feel myself holding on or clinging, and I say this prayer and I'm just able to let go. And what it does, it helps me to not feel so alone in my struggle. And despite my struggles, I am on a clear path, right? I understand my health goals, my life goals, my non-negotiable habits that support me in feeling more alive and ultimately cultivating good energy. Now, I am coining the term good energy from my dear friend, Dr. Casey Means, and New York Times bestselling author to the book called Good Energy. And I will link to our podcast episode talking about her mission to help create good energy. And to be honest, my biggest mission is to help you create good energy. And for the past 3 years, I have been focusing on improving our metabolic health and ultimately our good energy, especially in midlife when our bodies begin to shift, really without permission. And over the past 2 months, I have interviewed the best thought leaders and experts on how to optimize our health in midlife and beyond. Now, when this episode goes live, I will be wrapping up over 40 interviews with experts like Dr. Casey Means, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, Dr. Mindy Pels, Dr. Sarah Gottfried, Stephanie Estima. The list is endless. We have so many incredible interviews to bring you the biggest perimenopause and menopause event of the year, my Thriving in Perimenopause and Menopause Summit. Now, the last time I hosted an event like this was back in 2021. It's been a while, and over 95,000 women attended it for free. This epic event will also be free. So stay tuned to register for this beautiful, amazing free event in just a few weeks. The actual event will go live October 14th to October 19th, but you are going to get some free goodies just for registering to attend. Now, the project has been many, many months in the making, and it has been a labor of love, just like this podcast, but I couldn't be more thrilled at how powerful and actionable this event will be for you. Almost every expert I interviewed has either been through perimenopause and is in menopause or has taken care of hundreds to thousands of midlife women. So these are experts upon experts. And what I think what's important is that someone who was going through it or who has been through it, right? Because there's something to be said about the lived experience. And the area that of focus that I'm really doubling down on today and in the summit is building resilience, mental, emotional, and physical resilience. And at the core of that resilience is cellular energy. It's good energy. And I am a full body yes to good cellular energy. And I hope you are too. Now, since I started seeing patients back in 2008, I have watched and listened to women share their experiences about gaining weight and experiencing low mental and physical energy out of nowhere, just starting to feel drained, right? Just not having the mental capacity, feeling like they don't have the energy to do the things that they want to do, especially during perimenopause and menopause, despite not really changing anything in their diet and exercise routine. And I always believed them because I know that women are deeply committed to how they feel in their bodies, especially because they are holding space for so many other people. There is no one more committed to their family's health, to their partner's health than us. Every woman, even women who had been training for triathlons at the age of 40 or doing CrossFit classes every other day at the age of 42, honestly, by 44, they felt a major shift. They felt a bit worn down. They felt achy. They felt a bit heavier, maybe puffier, and they were struggling with motivation to get to the nearest gym. And adding insult to injury, they also gained weight without permission almost overnight. And I have a feeling that probably has happened to you. It's definitely happened to me. If this has been your struggle as well, you are not alone. Millions of women stand by your side. So many women are struggling with midlife weight gain, brain fog, low energy, and a myriad of other symptoms, obviously. And the reasons always come back to, well, your hormones and your mitochondria, which are the producers of your cellular energy. Now, traditional approaches to weight loss and symptom management have often failed women in midlife because we're not looking at the full picture and connecting the dots between insulin resistance and shifts in our hormones, whether it's hormonal imbalance or declining hormones. I mean, how often have you heard your doctor or a friend of yours hear from their doctor to just lose some weight, reduce your stress, and move your body more, especially in midlife when you go in for your physical exam because your lipids and fasting blood sugar went up a bit. Unfortunately, this explanation discounts the complex physiological and metabolic changes the female body undergoes during the menopausal transition, also known as perimenopause. Voila, it's the stage that I'm in right now, right? The stage that many of us, 25 million in the States alone, the US states. And it hinders people from addressing the root cause that's impacting millions of women in perimenopause and postmenopause. See, weight loss has never been and never should be about calorie counting or expenditure for women. It needs to be about understanding the hormone changes in midlife and aligning ourselves with strategies to optimize our metabolic health and resilience. I mean, that's what it needs to be all about. So over the past, again, several months, really a couple of years now, I have poured through hundreds of research articles, but most importantly, the last couple of months, I've poured through at least 50, pointing to declining and fluctuating reproductive hormone levels during perimenopause, which is par for the course, and menopause as a root cause for weight, body composition changes, insulin resistance, muscle loss, unfavorable shifts in blood lipids, and an abrupt reduction in metabolic rate and energy expenditure, not to mention the vast brain changes and inflammation that occurs during this profound transition. The menopausal transition, also known as perimenopause, is associated with several physiological changes that may impact a woman's health outcomes, including an increased risk of metabolic, neurological, and cardiovascular diseases. See, most women experience some level of insulin resistance during their adult years, with that percentage increasing dramatically after the age of 45. And if you're wondering, well, why 45? That's often where many of us may go into late perimenopause, right? Where we start to skip those periods. We start having, cycles that are separated by more than 60 days, and we start to see a shift a precipitous, well, it's not precipitous for estradiol. It's more of a roller coaster decline of estradiol. And with that, we start to see some of these metabolic things start to shift. Insulin often gets dumped into the diabetes bucket of healthcare. And for otherwise healthy people, it is often overlooked until it's a bit too late. But if you're a woman dealing with things like low energy, night sweats, stubborn weight gain, brain fog, irregular menstrual cycles, paying attention to insulin is really the key to unlocking metabolic flexibility and greater health and vitality. Now, there are 5 major reasons why women experience changes in their metabolic health, along with weight changes and energy changes. And I'm going to unpack each and every one of these so that you can really see how far reaching these changes can be for your body and for your health, and why it's so important to be paying attention to this. And thank goodness we can adopt pivots to really support our bodies throughout. So the first one is imbalanced or lower levels of sex hormones, predominantly progesterone, estradiol, and testosterone. Number 2 is a decline in muscle mass. And what I would love to add to that is not only a decline in muscle mass, but also we're beginning to see a decline in bone mass and a decline in muscle strength. Number 3 is blood sugar variability and an increase in insulin resistance. Number 4 is a redistribution of fat from the hips, thighs, and butt to abdominal visceral fat. And number 5, an abrupt reduction in metabolic rate and energy expenditure. So we start to see even our resting metabolic rate start to shift and start to lower. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into what's happening in our bodies in each of these 5 areas. I think it's important when we know this information, we can take it in and then say, okay, what kind of habits am I adopting? And later on in this episode, at the end, I'm going to actually share what habits I am adopting, what things I'm doing to mitigate the risk of some of these coming down the line, especially when I have felt these changes happening to me. So number 1, I want to address imbalanced and lower levels of sex hormones. So I start here because counteracting declining hormones is going to be a foundational aspect to getting your body back to functioning optimally when it comes to metabolism, weight, energy production, and brain function. Many of the other areas I'm covering today are directly linked to this steep but nonlinear decline in sex hormones that is a natural part of the menopausal transition, but can feel like anything but, right? If our hormonal changes in perimenopause are the real culprit here, we need to narrow our focus and find out exactly what is out of balance. For most women, the major players are going to be insulin, estradiol, progesterone, and testosterone, and then other hormones like androgen and adipolectin may also come into play. Even leptin, right, can be playing out here. Research shows that hormonal changes during the menopausal transition drive insulin resistance, which directly relates to metabolism, fat distribution, and weight gain. Insulin resistance and obesity are connected, deeply connected, with each potentially driving the other in a very complex relationship. Hyperinsulinemia, also known as high insulin levels, promotes glucose to be stored as fat. Likewise, weight gain and obesity further impairs insulin signaling inside of the cell and on the cell, creating a very vicious cycle. Estrogen often offers protection against insulin resistance, which is a risk factor for prediabetes, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes, and really is a root cause for weight gain by enhancing insulin sensitivity. So while we still have estradiol, which is pretty much throughout our entire cycle, we are maintaining that insulin sensitivity to some degree. Obviously, we know that there are younger women in their 20s and their 30s who are struggling with polycystic ovarian syndrome. That is playing out in terms of increased insulin resistance, driving those symptoms. So just note that could we be dealing with an issue of insulin resistance early on in life? And then with the loss of that estradiol, we see an even deeper kind of drive towards worsening insulin resistance? Absolutely. But just note that for many of us, estradiol is offering a lot of protection. So is progesterone, right? And so when we start to lose those protection hormones and maybe we didn't have the lifestyle foundation to back it up, it really does feel like we fall off a cliff. So when estrogen starts dropping during perimenopause, it really it can feel like a big problem. And in many instances, it is. Honestly, losing these hormones isn't taking us somewhere good. The exact process for this is still unclear, but preliminary research points to estrogen's potential role in increased glucose uptake in the muscles. By your final menstrual period, which is, on average, 51 years old, estrogen will have declined over 65% compared to your reproductive years, and more for many of us. Research also demonstrates that the decline in estradiol and progesterone may lead to a more androgenic pattern of fat redistribution. Think belly fat. So when we see a decline in estradiol, if in the ratio of testosterone, because some of us are still rocking some decent testosterone coming into menopause, we'll actually see more of an androgenic redistribution of fat, which is that accumulation of fat around the abdominal area. So declining ovarian function and estradiol, the main form of estrogen that we make in our reproductive years, E2, which is offering the biggest benefit in the body. With that deficiency, we know that estradiol deficiency impacts metabolism in women by these major areas. One, an abrupt reduction in metabolic rate, loss of muscle mass, a redistribution of fat to the abdominal area, an unfavorable shift in lipid levels, so triglycerides, cholesterol, LDLs, HDLs, a reduction of physical activity energy expenditure, increased risk of fatty liver disease, increased insulin resistance. So because of the decline of hormones is not linear in perimenopause, and it's fluctuating and changing by every month, week, even day, it can really feel like a moving target. Like, how do we even nail this? We also know that the rapid changes in our critical hormones can lead to an inflammatory state. Hence, one of the reasons we see an increase in autoimmunity, prediabetes, neuromusculoskeletal pain, so pain in the joints and in the tissues, and ultimately some metabolic issues as well. So I wanted to just paint the picture that with ovaries going offline, right? It's not just the fact that you're losing your menstrual cycle. It's not just the fact that you're not going to bleed anymore with a period. There are deeper systemic issues happening. And the one that I really wanted to highlight is the metabolic changes that are happening. Because ultimately, if it's impairing our good energy, our cellular energy, well, then it's going to impair every system in the body. Because most chronic disease states, right, is inflammation. And it's usually inflammation because the cell is not able to make appropriate good energy. That cell becomes scared. That cell sends out an SOS signal, which again, the only defense that our body has there, once our cells are sending out that in danger signal, is inflammation. Unfortunately, sending immune cells to a damaged cell isn't necessarily it's not going to fix the energy expenditure problem. It's going to just drive more inflammation. So whether those are damaged cells inside of the liver, then we see fatty liver disease, or it's damaged cells inside of the brain, which again, we start to see brain inflammation and cognitive decline, or it's damaged cells inside of the endothelial of our vascular vessels. Then we start to see like atherosclerosis and plaquing and damage to those arterial walls. That's heart disease. So again, once we have a cellular energy problem, that becomes an inflammatory problem. And then over time, that becomes a disease state. So as our hormones are declining and we start to see metabolic changes moving in an unfavorable direction, and basically what we're saying here is we are seeing a state of declining cellular energy, well, then we know that we're heading towards a disease state. And really how I define once we see metabolic disease forming, it's when our mitochondria that are the producers of cellular energy, once they drop below a certain capacity, which is about 50% capacity, that's when we see the uptick in metabolic numbers. Our metabolic biomarkers go out of range in unfavorable directions. So the reason why I want to highlight that connection between declining hormones and declining metabolic, function is because it's true. It's there. Why do we see an uptick in these changes in the perimenopausal transition and definitely right after menopause? Well, it's because these protective hormones, as we lose that protection and we don't have a good energy foundation, then we start to see things move in an unfavorable way. Number two, decline in muscle mass. I know that we've been talking so much about making sure you're eating your protein, lifting heavy, resistance training. Well, there's a reason for that, because one of the most concerning changes that occurred during the perimenopausal transition is the increase in overall percentage of body fat and loss of muscle mass. A 2022 study found that the greatest increases in overall percentage of body fat, especially visceral fat, which is the most dangerous, and decreases in lean muscle mass occurred during perimenopause, not menopause or postmenopause. This is why perimenopause is the most optimal intervention window to make lifestyle changes that protect and preserve metabolic resilience. By the time that women get into postmenopause, around 52 years old, the study found that it's both challenging for the body to use fat for fuel, so those long-term energy stores, and it has been an increased resistance to building lean muscle. So statistics show that women by the age of 45 are more likely than men to be overweight or have obesity, and insulin resistance is playing a significant role. These changes can be very frustrating when favorite clothes no longer fit, or the same workout routines and nutritional efforts are less effective at maintaining the same body composition, right? It's concerning. And that deep concern about weight and body changes during perimenopause is not trivial. We should not be ignoring it. And we should not be unmotivated by it either, because there are a lot of things that we can do. So weight gain and obesity are also risk factors for type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. And I would argue that prediabetes is diabetes. I mean, I don't know why we're distinguishing it from anything different. We know that severe metabolic changes happen in a state of prediabetes. We don't need to wait till we're officially diagnosed with type 2. Prediabetes should be an official diagnosis in its own right. So we know that, again, weight gain and obesity is a risk factor for type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease, stroke, and other potentially deadly conditions. You are more predisposed towards these conditions in perimenopause, really, because of the massive hormone declines and shifts. And so any additional weight or muscle loss just really compounds the problem. So targeting your muscle in perimenopause is one of the most proactive, beneficial things that you can do to protect your heart, your bones, your brain, and resilience through this transition and into postmenopause. Muscle cells are the main type of cells that will absorb glucose from your bloodstream. So less muscle always equals more circulating blood sugar. Two of my favorite go-to experts on this topic is Dr. Gabrielle Lyon and Dr. Stacy Sims, both whom were both on the podcast last year. And I can reference those interviews in the show notes. But I highly recommend going and following them on social media because they really lay out the profound importance of protecting, maintaining, and building muscle. Number three, and I've been touching upon it basically this whole time, but it's blood sugar variability. So when we are struggling with insulin resistance, it can become a vicious cycle to get out of, right? I mean, oh man, and mind you, if you're not being like proactive about it, it can get out of control, right? That's why we have, oh my gosh, almost 93% of people are metabolically unfit, right? Over 50% of people have insulin resistance and are heading towards prediabetes. So it is a vicious cycle. Yet we can reverse it. We can back it up if we are mindful. And what's so crazy about insulin resistance, especially when it's out of control, is that our bodies can essentially become intolerant to carbs, even healthy ones. I'm talking, sweet potatoes and pears and some fruits, right? Especially carbs, what I call naked carbs. So like carbs that are just by themselves, like a bowl of rice, or a bowl of quinoa or oatmeal. So we have to be really mindful about not just processed carbs, ultra processed foods, and acellular carbs, right? Kind of empty carbs, but even these healthy complex carbs. When we're on a vicious insulin resistance cycle, we really need to be mindful of those too. So, as we get older and we're struggling with this, we always want to pair an apple with almond butter, things like that. So when blood sugar rises normally, your body is able to compensate by absorbing the glucose to use in your cells as energy, like immediate energy, right? When blood sugar stays chronically elevated or your body is unable to process it efficiently, right? That's bad energy due to insulin resistance. Your body defaults to fat storage mode. It's got to do something. It's got to transfer that glucose into something that's more long-term storage. And this leads to some major unexpected body changes for women who really haven't changed changed much in their diet or lifestyle routines. I'm talking belly fat. I'm talking visceral fat. I'm talking weight gain, that, that uncomfortable 5 to 10 to 20 pounds that you just can't get rid of anymore. And insulin resistance, we know, along with high blood glucose, contributes to 9 out of 10 leading causes of death in the US and is a central player in declining female fertility, affecting 1 in 6 women today. I'm talking about polycystic ovarian syndrome. I believe that blood sugar and insulin are the ultimate biomarkers to pay close attention to in midlife, if not before, especially if you've got the subtle signs. Blood sugar and our body's ability to regulate it appropriately influence how we use energy, how we store fat, how much inflammation is in the body, and to a larger extent, whether or not we will eventually develop a chronic disease. And I spoke into that just a little bit ago. So you may think of like jitters, tiredness, cravings, sleep disturbances, or brain fog as kind of these bigger indicators of blood glucose regulation. But in fact, insulin resistance has been pegged by researchers as the driving force and root cause behind many different symptoms and serious health conditions. It has been shown that it is the #1 risk factor for heart disease, so ischemic heart attack and stroke. Now, the symptoms can really range from subtle, mild inconveniences to life-altering diseases. Poor metabolic health, driven in part by insulin resistance, can look like a full spectrum of daily pain points of modern living that keep us from reaching our full potential and goals. So I just want to just share some of the what I call subtle symptoms of metabolic dysfunction driven by insulin resistance. So fatigue, brain fog, depression or anxiety, poor sleep, lack of exercise endurance or exercise resistance, muscle loss, infertility, irregular menstrual cycles, heavy bleeding during your period, PMS symptoms, pelvic pain or frequent urinary leaks, hot flashes and night sweats, acne or other skin irritations, skin tags, sugar cravings, increased appetite, stubborn belly fat or an inability to lose weight, especially despite exercising or dieting, high blood pressure, getting sick often, like chronic colds, and chronic pain. Now, the more advanced and overt impacts of metabolic dysfunction can include polycystic ovarian syndrome or uterine fibroids, thyroid dysfunction, obesity, right? Dysfunctional body fat storage, often measured by BMI or a DEXA scan, insulin resistance and diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, known as NAFLD. So that's dysfunctional management of glucose and fat in the liver, which I think like 30+% of adults are now struggling with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Cancer, because we know that cancer thrives on excess sugar. It's their food of choice. Alzheimer's disease, now being called type 3 diabetes, with evidence of insulin resistance in the brain. Cardiovascular diseases like heart attack and stroke because of the damage to vessels from inflammation and excess glucose in the blood. And chronic kidney disease. Now, if you're experiencing any of these signs, there's a good chance that insulin resistance is running the show. Keep in mind that insulin isn't the enemy. The goal here is to create balance and stability. And what that looks like is going to vary woman to woman, even week to week, as your body changes so drastically during the menopause and postmenopausal, transition. And I'll be sharing, obviously I have episodes where I go deeper into what we can do, right? Especially like, again, first looking at labs of fasting insulin, which I'm going to get into in just a minute, tracking and seeing where you're at. But I will be sharing some of the things that I'm doing here in this episode. But just note that I have many, many episodes on how we can wrangle that insulin resistance back to normal range. Number 4, probably one of the most disruptive things that we'll see, even if the scale doesn't change, is fat redistribution from the thighs and butt to the belly. So a 2019 study of menopausal women, researchers examined body mass metrics for basically almost 1,300 participants spanning the 8 years before their last menstrual period and 10.5 years after. So they looked at them in perimenopause and then postmenopause. They found that lean body mass and fat mass increased in 8 to 2 years leading up to the last period. So basically most of perimenopause. Then the rate of fat gain doubled from 2 years before to 1.5 years after the last period, while lean body mass decreased. The researchers note that an increase in fat mass coupled with a decrease in lean body mass, so that lean muscle mass, demonstrates how body composition changes during this time, even when the number on the scale doesn't. This is significant from a health perspective because of abdominal visceral fat accumulation. This fat surrounds abdominal organs and is associated with increased cardiovascular risk and insulin resistance and other chronic diseases. Another study looking at the same data for 362 women found that visceral fat accumulation increased sharply at 8% per year in the 2 years before the participants' last menstrual cycle. So this would be like late 40s, early 50s. This increase was independent of aging. The rise in visceral fat also correlated with an increase in thickness of the carotid artery. Greater thickness of this artery is a risk factor for heart disease. Ultimately, we don't want any thickness, right, in that carotid artery. So what are these processes really trying to tell us in changes with our body mass composition? Well, during the reproductive years, this HPG, the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, maintains a tightly controlled feedback loop throughout the menstrual cycle. As one sex hormone level rises, it starts to set off a chain of reactions on other hormone levels. These hormone fluctuations occur across the two main phases of the menstrual cycle, the follicular and the luteal phase, with ovulation taking place between the two phases. Profound changes during perimenopause alter these processes, right? Our menstrual cycle is all over the place, impacting blood glucose and impairing weight management. The feedback loop of the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis influences glucose regulation, which is how we use and store energy from food we eat. The hypothalamus helps control food intake, energy expenditure, and body mass distribution, and these are all affected by estrogen. For example, estrogen's impact in this area of brain helps limit food intake, like working in concert with hunger suppressing hormones like leptin, and helps stimulate physical activity. Estrogen also helps curb white adipose tissue accumulation. The distribution of white adipose tissue is associated with metabolic deregulation, including insulin resistance. So basically, in a nutshell, what is happening is during that perimenopausal transition, our menstrual cycle and the hormones as a result become deregulated, right? They become, well, they're all over the place. And what used to be a very kind of consistent chain of events, when these hormones kind of followed the same distribution throughout the month, throughout the follicular phase and the luteal phase, all of a sudden, those hormones are not following those patterns anymore, leading to deregulation and metabolic changes. Again, as you heard, this isn't age. This is separated from aging. Yes, aging is happening too. And that's what makes it so complicated. Yes, we are aging throughout our 40s, 50s, and beyond. Obviously, we're aging the whole time. But this is independent of aging. The perimenopausal transition is what is setting us up for these profound metabolic changes. And again, they're not moving us in a favorable direction. And that's why we've got to pivot along with these pivots. Number 5 is the last one that I want to talk about, which is the abrupt reduction in metabolic rate and energy expenditure. So as progesterone and estradiol decrease in perimenopause, your body's rate of burning through glucose and calories changes dramatically. This is the reason why exercise routines you've always done to lose weight suddenly don't have the same effect anymore, right? The things that used to work in your 20s and your 30s, it ain't working in your 40s. As these hormones decline and our menstrual cycle deregulates, right? It's going offline, especially in late perimenopause, right? When we're skipping cycles, your body doesn't burn fat efficiently. And many women struggle to maintain effective exercise routines during perimenopause. Honestly, it's hard to maintain these types of routines. And really the reason why we're struggling to maintain resistance training in perimenopause is that we're losing strength. And we started to lose strength in our 30s. We may not have noticed, but we did. We start to lose strength as early as our 30s. It could be the precipitous loss in testosterone. It could be a part of the aging process. We're not exactly clear, but that's happening. And often we'll make adaptations for that in our 40s, especially with all the other things that we're carrying. Many of us are mothers. Many of us are caring for partners. We are expanding our career. We just have a lot going on, and, focusing and being disciplined, not that it's disciplined, but like really doubling down on the harder workouts, like lifting heavier weights, is something that some of us aren't choosing. We're choosing running. We're choosing cardiovascular and zone 2 training. We're choosing maybe HIIT classes, and those aren't necessarily helping us to build that lean muscle. So it's just, we got to reprogram the way that we think about training our bodies in this phase. Studies have basically shown a distinct change in how much energy or how many calories your body expends in the transition to menopause. This change should signal something for all of us. Your body is changing, so your habits need to change to meet these adjustments head on so that you continue feeling your best throughout perimenopause and postmenopause. To quickly summarize, the science is finally backing up what women in midlife have been experiencing for centuries. Declining metabolic health and cellular energy, along with body composition changes and loss of muscle, are real. And they are occurring due to declining hormones independent of age. And yes, aging is happening too at the same time. They're running two parallel tracks and they're not working in our favor, as I've mentioned before. And I think if you're in it, you know it. I feel it. I mean, as much as I'm working against it, I feel it. There are profound metabolic changes that are occurring on a cellular level for women in midlife due to the perimenopausal transition. And that's not to mention the other changes that occur in a woman's life that impacts her metabolic health, including pregnancy, postpartum, and our monthly menstrual cycle changes, right? Our bodies, if there's anything I can tell you about a woman's body, is that change is inevitable, right? And the major hormone shifts that we experience throughout our whole life, can be kind of stacking in this direction. This information now begs, well, what can we do about it? If our bodies are reorganizing in such a way that we are more insulin resistant and less metabolically resilient, and we have less muscle mass, what obviously needs to change to meet the needs of our body's changing landscape? The first thing I find helpful is knowing your numbers, ideally before perimenopause. As I've shared here before, having a timeline of your labs, your inflammation labs, metabolic labs, you're the full panel, hormone labs, is helpful to see trends and changes over time, especially in your early to mid 40s when metabolic labs start to shift. I cannot tell you how often I'm looking at a timeline of labs for women. I'm looking at their late 30s, their early 40s, and then all of a sudden their mid to late 40s, things start to shift. And they didn't do anything different. I see it every single day. I was looking at labs of a friend of mine just yesterday, and we start to see things creeping in an unfavorable direction. So, I mean, I see it all the time, every day. Clinically speaking, metabolic health is defined by normal levels of 5 biomarkers: blood glucose, triglycerides, high density lipoproteins, known as HDLs, cholesterol, blood pressure, and waist circumference. We can improve most of these markers by consistently making lifestyle choices that keep these biomarker levels in stable and healthy ranges. And I'll share more about these tactics a little bit later, things that I'm doing. Metabolic dysfunction occurs when 3 or more of the following biomarkers are out of range. And mind, these are standard ranges provided by the American Heart Association. They are not optimal, just a heads up. By the time these biomarkers are out of range, there's trouble occurring, right? There are metabolic dangers brewing in the body. Really what that means is when you fall out of the ranges that I'm about to give you, your metabolic health is in critical condition. Now, I will dive into optimal reference ranges in just a moment and include more important labs to provide a more comprehensive outlook into your metabolic health and your health span. So here are the 5 markers, and this is what your doctor is looking at. So I'm also including the ranges that they are looking at as well. So a waistline of 35 inches or more for women, right? If your waistline is 35 inches or more, then that is out of range, and 40 inches or more for men. Now, my recommendation is to have a waistline half the length of your height. So for me, 35 inches is way out of range. I think for me, I'm like at 31 inches or something like that. Fasting blood glucose above 100 milligrams per deciliter, HDL cholesterol less than 40 milligrams per deciliter, triglycerides above 150 milligrams per deciliter, and high blood pressure 130/85 or higher. Now that you've heard the standard lab ranges for diagnosing metabolic dysfunction and metabolic syndrome, right? 3 out of 5 of those need to be over those ranges. I want to also share a more comprehensive list of labs with a range that is more optimal, meaning when you pass the threshold of the lab ranges that I'm about to share, you are shifting you are shifting towards more metabolic dysfunction and inflammation. So this is why I recommend that women request the labs below to use these reference ranges below to determine their state of metabolic health. I will first go over the 5 I just shared a couple seconds ago, but provide you with more functional and optimal levels. So ideally, a fasting blood glucose level is under 95 milligrams per deciliter. And ideally, optimally 85 milligrams per deciliter. You want, I would say HDL levels below 50 milligrams per deciliter. I mean, the higher the HDL levels you can get, I love them to be in the 70, 80 range. Triglycerides above 80 milligrams per deciliter. You heard me, not 150, but 80 milligrams per deciliter. That's optimal. You want to keep them under 80 milligrams per deciliter. High blood pressure, so 130 over 80 or higher, but you want to keep your blood pressure around 120 over 70. The triglyceride to HDL ratio, probably one of the most important biomarkers to look at is the triglyceride to HDL ratio. So all you're going to do is you're going to take your triglyceride number and divide it by your HDL number. The ratio, if it's greater than 3-1, that's a problem. Ideally, you want it under 2. So greater than 2, but definitely greater than 3, you want to keep an eye out on that. This ratio is the greatest predictor of cardiovascular disease that you can run. Your erythrocyte sedimentation rate, so your ESR, also known as your SED rate, you want it lower than 20 millimeters per hour for females under 50, and 30 millimeters per hour for females over 50. So make sure that they run the ESR, also known as the SED rate. High serum fibrinogen, so you want it under 350 milligrams per deciliter. A moderate to high serum ApoB, basically anything above 90, is concerned. It's concerning for an ApoB, this is a protein carrier for cholesterol, a very big indicator, and for cardiovascular disease. Abnormal liver function tests, so AST, ALT, and GGT, or fatty liver disease diagnosis. A high serum ferritin level, so anything above 200 nanograms per milliliter. A high serum uric acid level, so above 7.7 milligrams per deciliter. A low serum magnesium level, so under 2 milligrams per deciliter. A hemoglobin A1C above 5.7, again, an indicator of prediabetes. A fasting insulin level, so very inexpensive test, but one we don't run enough. Always ask for it. You want your fasting insulin to be under 5.5 milliliter, I want to say it's millimoles per milliliter. Micro international units per milliliter. Sometimes I mix these up. So you want a fasting insulin level of 5 micro international units per milliliter. Yes, I know that a normal fasting insulin will go from 2 to 25, but if you are in the double digits, that's insulin resistance. Even 6 and 7 is moving into a state of insulin resistance. A 1 to 2 hour post 75 gram blood glucose test, you want it to be under 120 milligrams per deciliter, or insulin under 30 micro international units per milliliter. So sometimes they'll run that that fasting glucose test. It's the glucose tolerance test. That's the one that they do for women with gestational diabetes. But if someone's concerned that you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, they'll run that as well. Now, I want to really quickly share that I get that those were a lot of lab values and a lot of information. And so I have a metabolic assessment guide in the show notes that has all of this written out. I'm also creating a comprehensive perimenopausal lab guide with all the labs that we should be looking at in perimenopause, plus all of the optimal ranges. And I'm going to have that available very soon. It's not fully ready yet. We're getting it. I think it's getting designed right now. And then we're creating it as something you can get your hands on. But I also have a metabolic assessment guide that is available right now that you can get your hands on. So make sure to grab that. Now, I can't emphasize how important it is to get your labs drawn and reviewed annually, especially in midlife or as early as 40, so that you can measure and make improvements of your biomarkers over time. For most of us, they move in an unfavorable direction during perimenopause due to the default hormone disruption and ensuing continuing inflammatory state as a result. Yes, perimenopause leads to inflammation as well. Again, when these hormones are not in sync anymore, they're not running their normal cycle, it causes chaos everywhere. Obviously, when we see metabolic dysfunction creep up, we know that inflammation is creeping up too. Plus, many of us become more insulin resistant due to declining estradiol levels, as I shared earlier, and insulin alone can drive many of those critical biomarkers out of range, including cholesterol, triglycerides. When I see a high triglyceride score, I know that that's insulin resistance. Blood pressure, fasting blood glucose, hemoglobin A1C, ApoB, uric acid, and many more. So when these things start to go out of range, the first thing I think of is insulin resistance. That's what I think of. And that's what I want to look at. And so often when I see these start to move in the unfavorable direction, I'll look at the fasting insulin and it'll be 7, 8, 10, 11. And I'm like, bingo, there's your insulin resistance right there. Now, from a research article titled The Crucial Role and Mechanism of Insulin Resistance and Metabolic Disease. So insulin resistance is characterized by insulin-mediated blood glucose management disorders, blood glucose utilization disorders, abnormal lipid accumulation, and increased lipid decomposition activities in adipocytes, which can be called insulin resistance syndrome or metabolic syndrome. As a hotbed, insulin resistance breeds obesity, type 2 diabetes, and its complications, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, known as NAFLD, tumor, vascular disease, and other metabolic diseases. Any disease or disorder that leads to an abnormal metabolic process can be defined as metabolic disease, which poses a major threat to the human health and affects the quality of life of that person. Therefore, it is of great necessity to understand insulin resistance clearly and explore innovative therapeutic approaches to reduce the burden of disease. Like, that's how critical it is. I just wanted to paint that picture. That's basically what I've been saying this whole solo episode. Unless we make pivots to improve our overall metabolic health, energy, and vitality, we ultimately find ourselves struggling with chronic conditions that rob us of what matters most: time spent being present with the people we love most and doing the things that we absolutely love. Let's call it freedom, right? Although women do live an average of 4 years longer than men, 4 to 6, give or take, we spend an average of 25% of our lives living and dealing with chronic health issues that reduce our quality of life. We deserve a better method of healing, feeling stronger, feeling energized and amazing, than being told that we just need to suck it up and just be okay with the normal process of menopause and aging. This doesn't cut it anymore. Midlife is a time for serious health assessment and reflection. So again, as I mentioned earlier, it's so important to know your numbers because most of these diseases, including metabolic dysfunction, is silent. Yes, there are subtle symptoms, but man, we often excuse them away for being moms or just being women or life being too busy. I mean, you know what I'm saying? And so we've normalized our struggles when the underlying concern down below is metabolic dysfunction. So it's important that we stay on top of that. Again, as I mentioned, go and grab that metabolic assessment. It walks you through questions, it gives you labs, it walks through body composition. I mean, really everything you need to know to figure out, is my metabolism struggling? And if so, like, what are the next steps? Now, it took me a really long time to understand how to harness our power, but I did. I figured it out. And at almost 45 years old, I have more metabolic flexibility and energy that I had in my 30s. And what I want to do today is I want to share what I'm doing, what I'm doubling down on in my 40s, my mid to late 40s, turning 45. Like, I'm at that halfway mark to 50. And I'm at the halfway mark. I mean, honestly, at 45, I'm over the halfway mark of our average life expectancy, right? Which I think is like 82 for women. And so half of my weeks, I mean, if we're looking at life expectancy, are up. I'm in the second half of my life right now at 45 years old. And I know that my increased risk for insulin resistance at this age, as I turn 45, is in the 90 percentile. That's how serious it is for us, even at 45 years old. And so don't think I'm not paying attention. I'm about to put a new continuous glucose monitor on this week. I was just wearing one a couple weeks ago. I told myself I would wear one for a month. So I took a couple of days off and I'm going to put a new one on because I'm about to do a whole blood glucose tolerance test. I'm just, looking at the numbers. That's what I'm doing going into 45 is I'm tracking my blood glucose and I'm seeing what's going on. I'm also about to do a GI map test as well. So I'm stepping into 45, looking at all my markers again. I'm running a bunch of labs right now. I'm looking at my microbiome because that's also playing a role. actionable, right? So what I'm going to share with you, what I'm doubling down is because I want to make the most of what I consider my second half of life, my second chapter, and I'm hoping will be the best years yet. Although I'm still working with my brain, I'm still trying to figure out my migraines metabolically. I'm rocking it. So, it can be a yes and you could still be trying to figure certain things out in your journey while other things are dialed. And I mean, I guess that's life, right? So here are my best tips. I'm going to keep it short because I want to shore this episode up. I don't want to be too long, but I want to share what are my best tips, because honestly, the juice is worth the squeeze. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't working. I mean, just like you, my time is very valuable, and I'm really mindful of where I put my energy. So the first thing I'm doing, outside of running my labs twice a year, which I'm about to do right now, is I am using wearables. I use a continuous glucose monitor, as I mentioned, to track my blood glucose in real time. And I believe that wearing a CGM is the gateway to understanding your cellular energy, your good energy, and what's impacting that energy, right? Including your sleep, your movement, your stress, and most importantly, what you're putting into your body, right? The food, the substrates that are going to become your future brain. Next, I wear a Whoop to track my heart rate variability. I'm charging it up right now, so I don't have it on right this second, but I'm going to be putting it on in just a moment. But I look at my heart rate variability, which is a key indicator of your resilience. It really, what's going on with your heart rate variability is going to show you, like, it's really, heart rate variability is directly connected to vagal tone. And when you've got good heart rate variability, you often have good high vagal tone. And what we know is that when those two are very dialed and optimal for your body, your resilience towards stressors is great. When your heart rate variability is low, along with your vagal tone, you are more prone to chronic disease. So it's a great way of tracking what's going on, what your body is dealing with, and how it's managing stressors in the system. It can also be an indicator that you're exposed to toxins or, again, outside forces and stressors. So I love to look at it as, okay, what if my heart rate variability is lower a couple days in a row? What's happening in my life that is driving that response? I also love that the Whoop tracks stress in real time. It tracks sleep and like all facets of sleep in terms of deep quality sleep. It gives you an overall body score, and it really tells you how hard you can push for the day. It's excellent at measuring recovery and overall energy resilience, which I find very invaluable, especially as we get older. Food. So when it comes to food, I think about food as what's going to feed my future brain. I'm not fully, eat to live, but pretty close. I eat metabolically healthy meals that include protein, fiber, healthy fats, and micro and antioxidant rich foods, omegas, and fermented foods. I'm mindful of what I eat because I know that it is going to shape all of my future cells, including my brain. And I'm very interested in keeping my brain healthy. And I will link to the episode on how to create metabolically healthy meals. But I'm mindful about everything I put into my body. We were just on a trip to Catalina Island, and I was really navigating a lot of the food choices there because they weren't all great. And we brought a lot of snacks, and there was a grocery store. And so we were able to buy like organic berries and, just have protein sources. And so I was just like, again, really mindful about where we ate, what we ate, because that matters. So, yeah, I'm intentional. I think that's important. I don't just put food in my body because I think I'm not willing to make excuses for food that isn't going to serve me. So you're not going to see me eating French fries. You're not going to see me eating fried food. I don't feel good with fried food. I don't even feel good with fried food that's fried in avocado oil versus canola oil. Like it's not supporting me. So I don't alcohol. No, thank you. It definitely doesn't help my brain. That's for sure. I mean, it really does feel like a poison to my body at this point. And so you have to look into, you have to really check in with yourself. Dairy and gluten are no go for me. Highly processed foods, ultra processed foods, no. We make almost everything from scratch at this point in my house because I'm at a point where I can really feel the effects of food on my body. And so I'm really careful about what goes in it. Like this morning, what I had for breakfast is I had turkey sausage, I had eggs, I had avocado, I had homemade pesto. Obviously, I had coffee. I ain't gonna lie about that. And I had blueberries. That was what I had for breakfast this morning. And so I'm just, and some arugula as well, some bitter greens, to make sure that I'm kind of hitting all those macro and micronutrients. Movement. So I move throughout the day. That is my goal. I'm trying to move all the time. I get in where I fit in. It's not always easy. Some days it's resistance training with lots of walking. Other days, like today, it's hot yoga, mini exercise snacks, and walking. But I find that if I move my body throughout the day, all day long, it is banking towards better metabolic resilience than just doing that one big workout and then being done for the day. So movement is constant. And I believe movement is life. Next, I get outside and I ground. We just put in clover in our backyard. We bought our house with AstroTurf and we had it in for like almost 2 years. When we went through our mold remediation, I mean, honestly, I knew I do not want AstroTurf in my backyard, but it was an undertaking. It was everywhere. So, but when we had our mold inspection done this spring, back in March, the inspector was like, AstroTurf breeds nasty mold. And I was like, oh my gosh. So we ripped it out and now we have clover everywhere. It's so beautiful. And so we've been grounding in the clover every single morning and it feels so good. I do it for boosting my mitochondria, supporting my circadian rhythm, right? Getting that sunlight in my retinas and grounding to support my body as well. Just being my feet in the grass is it feels so good. I take supplements. I just took a bunch of them a little bit ago. Vitamin D, omegas, probiotics, digestive enzymes, magnesium, a liver support blend with a bunch of antioxidants, adaptogens, brain support supplements with nootropics. There's a lot of lists, a lot of supplements inside of my brain support supplementation. I take phospholipids. Again, non-negotiables are the ones that I first mentioned. I also do binders. I'm still kind of on a mold protocol. I have fiber. I put fiber in my smoothies on top of all the fiber that's just in my smoothies. Matcha as well is a big one for me. So again, I take a lot of supplements depending on what's going on with me. I do glutathione, liposomal glutathione. But yeah, I'm just, what can I do to support my brain and my cellular energy? I use bioidentical hormones. I have no problem admitting that. Full transparency. I take oral micronized progesterone in the second phase of my cycle that starts tonight. And I wear an estradiol pad. I am still dialing this in. I am working with an amazing colleague and a hormone doctor who's been doing it for 30 plus years, way more experience than I have with it. And I'm working with her to dial it, especially for my migraines. But also I know that I'm losing hormones. So my progesterone levels are pretty much postmenopausal. So I will always be supplementing with progesterone moving forward. And then I'm trying to figure out what estradiol is going to be the right fit for me. Testosterone levels still look fine. So I'm not supplementing with that yet, but I'm open to it. And yeah, those are the things I'm doing with bioidentical hormones. I meditate for 30 minutes a day. I love Dr. Joe Dispenza meditations. I also love Ziva meditations. I use my sauna, my infrared sauna 3 to 5 times a week. I spend time in nature. I treat my sleep routine like it's $1 million meeting. I spend time with friends and I'm always sending voice memos. So I love spending time with friends in real life. And I do that every single week, but I'm also always voice memoing my friends as well. I just want to always be in deep connection with them because they are everything. They're my found family. I spend time with family, obviously, too. I cuddle Kingston multiple times a day for that yummy oxytocin boost. His giggles are the best thing in the world, and his hugs and his loves. He's still 3, but will be 4 in December. And oh my gosh, it feels so fleeting. So we're just making sure that we're savoring every little moment. I drink electrolyte water throughout the day. I play a lot at the playground, at the zoo, at the beach with my son, chasing waves. I have book besties and we read romantic fantasy books. A couple favorites are When the Moon Hatched, the Throne of Glass series, and the Kindred Curse saga. If you're looking for a good romantic fantasy series, I got you. I do breath work and I work with a trauma-informed therapist exploring parts work and somatic healing. And most importantly, I am consistent. I told you I was a Virgo. I've always been consistent. I talked about consistency in my last episode, episode 594, where I was talking about my year-long brain recovery journey. And I know that this year is going to be very full with lots of big changes, but I feel pretty prepared for it with all of the habits that I have in place. I know that I will be surrendering to pivots in my health and in my life, and I am a full body yes to that. I've also set up a lot of boundaries this year. And I've really focused on my mental well-being and my mental health. And so, you gotta check in with what matters the most. What are your non-negotiables and what are your goals? And then I go from there. And I am grateful to have you here on this journey with me for the ride ahead. So here's to an epic year of health at 45 years old. And here's to just an epic year of health for each and every one of us. I hope that this episode, at the very least, shined a light on what is going on. It is not your fault. Yes, there are things we can do to mitigate the changes that are happening in our bodies. And yes, we get to decide what matters most in terms of those changes. But I just want you to know that all the shame and the blame that we put on women about their bodies is just it's so wrong. It's outrageous. And it's lazy medicine, honestly. And we can do better for you, right? We can do better for us. And so I'm super excited for the summit because a lot of the things that I talked about today, I'm exploring even deeper. We have episodes about HRT, breast cancer, post-breast cancer with HRT, how to build metabolic resilience, thyroid support, oh my gosh, brain support, name it. How to Stay Forever Young with Dr. Tony Ewan. Just so many great interviews that are so actionable. And then you get to pick and choose in the Thriving in Perimenopause and Menopause Summit, like which ones you want to listen to and what actions you want to take from there. And so be on the lookout for more details. Again, you can start registering in a couple weeks on September 23rd. So a couple weeks from now, or 3 weeks from now, rather, 20 days from now, actually. But I wanted to just give you a heads up that that's coming down the pike. And then if this episode was helpful, if it gave you insight, if it gave you aha moments, if it inspired you in any way to make some changes today, then full body, yes. Please subscribe to the show when you get a chance and rate the show. Take a moment, rate it. And that way, more women who are looking for these answers, who are looking for viable solutions, things that are going to really move the needle for them, this is the place that they can come and it'll be easier for them to find. Until the next episode, have a beautiful day. And I'm just so excited for the fall and for the winter. I mean, let's rock these next 3 months, 4 months until we head into the new year, right? I'm excited for my birthday. I'm excited for the new year. I'm excited for all the things that are to come. And I think when we operate from that energy, a lot of beautiful, magical moments occur. All right. See you soon.